Hello and welcome to another episode of the Wavemakers Podcast, where we focus on the stories of the people leading the change across maritime, decarbonization, and digital transformation sectors. My guest today has held multiple executive positions across maritime, offshore oil and gas industries, and he's also very active in terms of investing in future technologies. It is my pleasure today to understand the story of RK Sethi. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here.
I would like to understand what was your journey into shipping?
As coming from an Indian household, growing up in early 90s, we were tuned to either become engineers or doctors. I think that's the vision of every parent who wants to give a good life to the children. And same way, the focus was to become an engineer. But I personally had a lot of interest in technology even during my childhood, and that's what the passion was. But then ended up in doing an engineering college, which I got marine engineering. There was no background or history of any maritime personnel in our entire family, but it was again an exciting thing, which led me to believe, okay, maybe that's a very good, interesting career path because it will help me to travel. Again, one of the passions. And said, let's do that. And then marine engineering happened. During the 4 years, we learned the nuances of the maritime industry, and then went on board the ship for the first time. And that's where the journey started. But then understanding from the marine engineer's perspective, sailed as an engineer, I thought I can do a lot better in the industry outside with this learning. And that's the journey continued with a lot of other functions, but then eventually that was the bread and butter to learn about the maritime industry and continue to get into it.
Mm-hmm. And I tend to share a quick intro with these roles that people hold, but the purpose of the podcast is to understand what drives the people.
Right.
And I wanted to ask you also, in your own words, how would you describe yourself?
Yeah, so basically, I would say that I'm a marine engineer turned entrepreneur, turned into a passionate person about technology, and which has helped me to grow my career and also helped me leverage the passion which I drive with. So as a person, by chance, marine engineer, a restaurateur, and a passionate person about travel, technology, and timepieces. So yeah, that's I would describe myself as that.
Mm-hmm. What were some of the lessons from these different chapters in your life?
I think the biggest lesson which I've learned is, or not the lesson, I would say the biggest learning has been the ability to break down complex issues into simple things which are easily understandable by the people or the team which I've worked with. So whether it is, explaining somebody how a ship works, or how technology works, how a restaurant pairing in food and whiskey works, or how a watch works. So, complexities which people who do not understand because they do not have the background from that, it seems complex. But then I've been fortunate enough or passionate enough to break it down into very simple examples of how these complex issues. That's been the biggest learning.
Mm-hmm. And through that, probably got the buy-in from people to
absolutely.
join you.
That brings the confidence of the people, that brings the trust on the people. So that's where I have been able to switch between multiple professions also, because in any workplace, when you give the confidence, when you give the trust to the person that this job can be done, it's easier to move forward. I think that's important.
And now that you mentioned switching, I know that it sometimes looks complicated to others or scary. Do you have some tip of how you decided to switch and where did that bravery come from?
I think the only focus which for me was to grow personally as an individual, and whatever obstacle or the challenge was presented, how to find a solution to it. So when I came as a marine engineer on board, I felt that the challenge I have is if I continue sailing for a long period of time, I wouldn't be able to explore the other skills what I have. That was my first challenge. So what I decided to leave the sailing life and step ashore. First opportunity again came in the commercial side of the maritime industry. Jumped on, took the challenge head on, learnt about the commercial and moved forward. So continued with the commercial and the techno-commercial technology career paths in the maritime industry. Challenge came that some friends and family decided we want to open a restaurant in Singapore. Said, who will leave the job and put their hand up? I said, it's a challenge, I will take it. So again, as and when the challenges came in, as a person, there were two ways: to be in your own comfort zone or take the challenge and move ahead. So every time I was presented with a challenge, I took that and moved ahead. And I think that's been the reason of my success, as I feel, that ability to take whatever comes and find a solution for it. It could have been easier to stay on board. Again, it's not a wrong choice, but that's a choice I made, was to shift and move ahead. That's how it is.
You were listening to your voice within that was calling you to
Yes,
a new
absolutely.
challenge. And is there something that was a learning from that life on the vessel that was useful for running a restaurant?
100%. I think I spent about 23 months on board the vessel. And what I attribute today to every aspect of my career after that and the success and failures is that 23 months. Because the biggest lesson I got from there was the ability to do anything and everything, whether to wash the floor, whether to paint, whether to look at the sewage system or the engine system. The ability to be hands-on with everything and not have hesitation to do any job helped me. And when I was running the restaurant, one day the cleaner got sick and had to go back to the hospital immediately from the restaurant. As the owner of the restaurant, I cannot hire a new person. Everybody else was doing their job. The cook was cooking, the waiters. So somebody had to take that responsibility. I put my hand up and cleaned the dishes for that entire evening because I didn't feel that it's anything less or more, because it's supposed to be done. So that learning came from the time being on board the ship, because on the vessel you are only 15, 18, 20 people. You cannot depend on outside help. So whatever be the task, you have to do it, is the biggest learning, I think, from being on the ship.
I assume also that people working with you also feel that, and then that builds the team spirit.
Absolutely. I think every maritime professional comes from that thought process who have sailed on the ship, that whatever be the task, we have to deliver it within that same finite resources we have, because again, you cannot be dependent on outside world when you are in the middle of the Atlantic or Pacific or anybody else. So that's it.
No one is saving you but yourself.
Absolutely.
And you mentioned quickly whether it's a failure or a success, right? Was there any point that at that time it looked like a failure, but then later on it resulted in success?
Yes, there have been instances, but so for me, running the restaurant for 2 years in Singapore was my biggest success in my career so far, and it has been the biggest failure also at the same time. It was due to personal reasons I had to quit the restaurant because things were not well with the partners and everything. But the learning at that point of time, I thought it's the biggest failure for me. But when after that, starting my career back from, I went back to school, did my master's in business, started my career again, and now reaching as I was a CEO in Nigeria for an offshore company, coming here in Dubai, leading the business strategy as a CEO and running a ship management company. When I look back, that failure of not being able to continue that success gave me so much learning that now that failure becomes successful for me. If I had not gone through that process, I wouldn't have utilized those learning to do what I'm doing today. So that's I think it's a failure and success at the same time.
And now that even the story came slowly back to Maritime as well, I will ask you the question I ask every guest, and that is, if you were a vessel, which vessel would you be and why?
Interesting question. I think I would see myself as a expedition vessel.
Oh, that's a new one.
Yeah, because I think working with cutting-edge technologies, the vessel finds and discovers newer pastures, always ready to take on any challenge which comes in, whether waves or the sea, the ocean, the ice or land. So as an expedition, I have personally been on an expediential journey in my career. So if I have to be a vessel, I would be a expedition vessel. I think that's, and then again utilizing cutting edge technologies to find solutions, which I've always been doing, and then breaking down problems to find solutions. So again, that fits well, I feel, for me. So
when it comes to the cutting edge technologies, are there some that you really believe in, and as they are now developing faster and faster and shaping the new age of shipping?
Yes, I think traditionally the maritime industry has been slow to adapt to what technologies are available in the market. And what has happened for me, I started my career during the early 2000s, and the shift of what we have seen in the last 25 years has been exponential. What you could imagine in 2003-4 is actually being implemented today. Even if you talk about AI or even the fuels or even the battery technologies. So what I'm bullish about in the maritime world with technologies would be the transition to more automation and also the expansion in terms of greener fuels and the battery technologies. I think these 2-3 things will define the future where the maritime industry technology goes in the next, let's say, 20 years. I was at the Ship Tech conference last week in Dubai, and I was also part of that conversation on what are the next 10 years of maritime future technologies going to be. So for me, there were 2 things. One is the battery technologies and maybe other fuel technologies as well, which again is propulsion, all related to propulsion. And the second one would be the IoT, wherein you have more technology-driven functions on board rather than human intervention. So this will define for me the next 10 years in the maritime space, I believe.
And across the founders' landscape driving these technologies, did you notice a trend on what makes founders successful within the maritime scope? So
I think irrespective of being the maritime space, I think what makes founders successful is the execution and operations. We sit here, we talk, we discuss, everybody can come up with 100 ideas, right? How to translate that idea into execution and operations is what drives or what makes or breaks the founder of any organization. A part of our vision, so I'm working with YC Ventures as the Group CEO. One of the visions we have is to create a platform wherein we invite, guide, mentor, put resources to founders who want to set up things in the maritime technology space. And coming in with that experience of driving startups, helping consulting startups in all functions, marketing, branding, technology, operations. The make or break for any new company or a startup today's day and age is operational excellence. And if a founder or a founding team can crack the operational excellence, any idea, I believe, can be made successful. That's what I believe in.
Do you think that operational excellence comes from having the best product or the best technology, or from being able to manage the stakeholders and bring people together to champion it?
It's a combination of both. I think product or the technology or the service has to have a market fit. Product market fit is important. Once you prove that this product or this solution is required, then you go with the stakeholders and operational excellence. Even an average product can become a huge big company if it is done right. I think, again, go back to the examples of the restaurant. When I started the restaurant, we opened the restaurant in the yacht club in Sentosa Island of Singapore. That place had already 25 restaurants in that two sections. And adding another restaurant where people go and eat food was not seemingly right because you already have competition. But I believe if the competition is there, that means there is a need for it. That means the product market fit is achieved, that people come there to eat. Now give them the best product to eat among other products and give them the service which is unmatched. So then operational excellence, if you're running that in a tight space also, you can create your niche. So then that comes with the operational excellence. But because the product demand is there, you will be able to successfully differentiate yourself and prove yourself better. I think another example is Apple. When it came into the industry, Nokia was ruling the world, but then it created its own name in that space and did it better than anybody else. So that's how I feel. If you can enter the space, do it better than anybody else, there is always a space and market for it. So.
Do you think that there is a specific culture to maritime, that there's something different in selling or scaling a product within maritime versus a different business?
Yes, I think maritime industry, as I said, has a lot of tradition and history attached to it, right? And it has been a traditional workspace. It has been a traditional marketplace where a lot of selling or enterprise sales have happened through relationships in the past, I think. And that has been true for every industry. But at the pace which the maritime industry has adopted to move from tradition to indigeneity now, I think that pace has increased. I think there is more acceptability. There is more trust on what is being presented through different mediums, whether social media, whether conferences, so initially the trust building in a product or a solution was more through relationships, traditional way of running the business globally, and it has moved to more technology based selling, more marketplaces coming in. And so the idea of trusting somebody has changed. Earlier it was word of mouth. You know me, I know you, I trust you. Now you go onto an Instagram post, an ad and reel and buy a product because you trust that somebody who's advertising on Instagram is not going to run away with your money. So that ways it has. So the adoption speed in the maritime space has been slow, but I feel in the last 5 to 7 years that has also increased, and moving from traditional ways to newer technologies and newer ways of approaching and selling has also changed, which I believe is the trend going forward. So
I suppose that the pace of the change and the pace at which we are pushed to make decisions speeds up this process of relationship building. So
Absolutely.
before, people had time to go and meet and talk and develop it, whereas now, due to that speed requirement, they have to somehow build it remotely, efficiently, through media channels.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely correct. Yeah.
And what are you looking forward to in the next 15 years?
As I mentioned, that the vision we have is to create a platform wherein, so as a company, I would say, rather than person, we have built multiple organizations in the maritime space: ship owner, ship manager, commercial management, crew management. We have invested into Ship Phoenix and ShipScart as a technology. So as a group, we have been able to create an entire resource pool that tomorrow somebody wants to come into that ecosystem, we will be able to provide, from being a ship owner to a technology partner to the agencies to the technical management. We can provide the first set of clients across every segment of the maritime industry. And that comes in from the understanding we have built it in the past, personally, professionally. So in the next 15 years, I would say that as a part of this platform, I want to groom, let's say, 5 or 7 startups in the maritime technology space, and hopefully have 2-3 unicorns out of that. So that's what the vision would be, definitely. And also, and also as a part of that, that is on the professional scale. Personally, I'm a watch collector. I'm very passionate about travel and watches. So I have a good collection, and showcasing that to the world, in terms of putting it out into the space on what the collection ethos is about, and travel new countries. And I've traveled almost now 53 countries so far, and the vision would be to continue traveling till I can successfully and health wise, to cross and see the maximum possible places across the world. So
now I remember that I actually brought you Ivar, and it's in the fridge, but since I forgot to bring it here, I will make sure to deliver it to you.
Thank you. Because that was very nice, actually. Me, my wife, my daughter, we all loved that when I told you we were traveling across Serbia, and it was really nice.
I cannot believe I forgot it.
You're still here.
I'm still here. Now I have reasons to extend my stay. But with regards to watch, that sounds like a new venture.
Which one?
The watch collection.
No, it's a personal passion. It's a collection I've been doing for years now. I built up I think close to 100 watches I have with me. It's again not to sell or resell. It is purely, the collection ethos is to have one particular timepiece from every brand, not have multiple things, and also the differentiator in the dial of the watch and colors. So it's just, again, it comes now when I look back at it, that since childhood, the ability to understand mechanisms on how things work led me to this maritime career also, that how it's always been intriguing on how a ship works, right, for an outside world. The other day I was discussing with my daughter, and I saw my pictures of my first birthday, and can you imagine that my first birthday was a ship? Who on earth would imagine that you would go into a maritime field? Neither my parents nor anybody.
Oh, wow.
And my first birthday cake is actually a cake in the shape of a ship. And I was like, wow, that's so amazing that the manifestation started when I was 1 year old. So
that is unbelievable. And also, some of these early childhood experiences shape our decisions later, and we are not even aware of it.
Absolutely, I think. And that same thing happened with the watches. When I now look back and speak to my parents, and they say, you were always intrigued to buy a watch, but a very different looking watch. when I was, I think the first, second watches during my early childhood, maybe 15, 16 years old, said you never went for a normal regular watch, but you wanted something very different. So I said, okay, maybe that's why this watch collection hobby developed in my mind during that time, and I continue. So yeah, it's been very passionate. I've been thinking of starting. No, I have an Instagram account with over 12,000 followers on my watch channel on my
Wow.
Instagram. But
Which one is it? Maybe someone would like to.
Yeah, it's called
join.
RKSTI.me. RK is time. So, but always have been a thought to start a YouTube channel maybe someday when I sit and relax, and then I can shoot the videos.
Yes.
That's
Or
all.
maybe you can use the venue and do
Absolutely.
it. That is very interesting. I was always wondering how come I ended up in shipping, but maybe I need to revisit my old
Childhood
pictures.
old pictures. Yes, absolutely.
What would be your advice to entrepreneurs coming into shipping now? When we talked about this journey of the next 15 years, and
Right.
let's say someone comes to you, how would you equip them in a short amount of time or few sentences?
I've been doing a lot of mentorship to young students who come out from the college, from maritime colleges. They come back with a lot of ideas. And the only advice which I give them is focus on the idea. Ideas are always there. As I said, you can have the worst product or the best product. The idea is always there with a lot of people. How to execute and deliver is going to make or break it. I think that's the single one-liner I always tell them. Execution is the key. Any idea can be made successful. That's as simple as it gets. And I think the focus, obviously the dedication, and not what I've seen in my experience right now is people in today's world want the success to come at a very fast pace, right? So the patience levels are less. I think patience is also one of the virtues which is very important to be successful. I think I sit here today after 25 years of grinding through all different industries and functions, and I'm able to sit and talk today because of that grind and patience. I think that is so. Execution and patience are in simplest of terms is what I believe it is important.
The digital portal is responsible for that impatience.
Absolutely, the attention span has gone down quite a lot. So.
Yes. And I always want to give a chance to my guests as well to be on the seat of asking questions. Sure. So I would like to pass over the torch.
I think it comes a very interesting question which popped into my mind during our conversation right now, because we had a conversation about, in the last forum I was talking about women in the maritime industry. So all the panelists were asked that what is your view of how do we promote more women in this industry? You being there already, how do you see that? And then I will give you my thought, but then first I want to hear from you that what do you think about being a woman in this industry, and how do you see what's the growth of women in the industry, and how can we make it happen as being a part of the industry?
I tend to also have these types of conversations with most of the women that I interview. It just comes naturally. And I have been in that position where I am the only woman in the room with many engineers. And also I've been in a company that has pretty diverse employee, let's say, structure. I also noticed that there are segregations when it comes to what roles women choose. For example, within sustainability, right. I think because we have this nurturing element and tend to choose ESG interests. So some of this, I think it's related just to the topic, and with that now becoming a more evolving topic, I do believe that more women will have the interest to join shipping as well, and that was my case. I only became interested in shipping when it met decarbonization. Other than that, I have felt that my opinion mattered every time I was in a room with colleagues who were men. And they also gave me always space to speak my mind and valued my opinion.
Thanks.
I do think that there is a difference to how we approach problem solving. And there's a different perspective, whereas I rely more onto feeling and sensations and dynamics of people, and I try to kind of go for the vision and then come back to, okay, how to make it happen. Whereas I noticed that some of the engineering colleagues approach it from a very structured point of view and step by step. And this is just something to have in mind when there are mixed conversations. That I do think that the magic lies when these two meet in the center point.
Right.
But that is probably the only difference.
But that's true. What I wanted to ask or listen from you is that you chose it because of a particular reason, or how you were able to think that, okay, the industry, maritime industry, would be a good fit for you. Mm-hmm. Where did that thought come from?
Yeah. So initially I had been invited to join shipping, okay, but I said, I know nothing about it. I don't think this is really my peak interest. And then when Maersk announced that the decarbonization strategy, and I was invited to join them to head the innovation portfolio, this is where I learned that shipping has such a big impact on the world. I think just because it became visible in numbers also, how much of the goods are transported through shipping, and also the emissions that are related to it. And then when I learned that I could have quite an impact, that is where my interest in shipping was sparked.
So it was functional, yeah, right? So, what my thought was, and it is contrary or different from a lot of people I've spoken in the maritime industry. I believe that being a part of the maritime industry, we do not glamorize or promote the maritime industry too much to our own kids, right? I have a 12-year-old daughter. When she speaks to me, I try to put the thought of that this is also an industry where you can look into a career. Any function, it could be a marketing function, it could be an ESG function or an engineering function, but an industry exists. Again, coming from my own childhood, till the time I joined the Maritime College, I had no idea of a maritime industry being existing. So I feel that as parents who are already in this industry, if we promote this to our own kids who see it and glamorize it enough for them to be a part of the industry, especially the girls, then there would be a lot more uptake in the generation coming in to see this as a viable future for them. It should not happen by chance or by function, but by choice. Mm-hmm. And the more like somebody wants, there are a lot of people today who want to become media personalities because it's a glamorized industry. There are a lot of people who want to become doctors because they feel it's a noble profession. It's a very high paying profession. So as part of the maritime industry, I always promote among our peers that you should glamorize this industry so that the generations coming in should see that as a probable career path rather than by chance. It should become by choice. Yeah. That's what I feel, that's how we can have more women coming into the industry.
I do agree with you that more visibility is needed.
Right.
And this goes back to our discussion before we started recording about marketing. It is just that it's not as visible for so many of us, and even to me. And I started paying attention to it because one of my friends started a company within the space, and he's one of my best friends. But until then, I was okay. I would see the ships, but it's just not close enough, and other things catch your attention more.
Absolutely.
But it is true also that for every role that there is in the world, it's maybe even more interesting to take it up within the maritime, because there's additional element of complexity and different factors that
it just gives you a different vision or a different perspective of how things happen, right? I mean, if you go into the media industry, you would see things from a very different perspective. If you go into the defense or the railways or the the engineering side, the medical side, so maritime industry itself has so many facets to it. It's not only about the ship, right? How support services we are talking today, it's again a part of the industry itself, right? But how that has changed and being accepted, it's important. And there is a space for everything. We provide food to the people who are on board. So it's nothing related to the maritime, but the logistics of supplying food and supplies to people on board for consumption is an industry in itself.
Yeah.
That has evolved amazingly. I've been a part of that for a short time, that there were companies who were managing 50, 100 ships. Initially, they were supplying it on call, through the port, through the agents, but then it became an industry in itself, that they had a separate team only managing the food and supplies to the vessel. Like how the airline industry works, you have air chefs, right, where these companies are specialized to provide food on the aeroplanes and the flights. Same way, that's an industry within the maritime industry itself. So you don't need to be in the maritime industry, but you can actually be a part of that industry and deliver services to the maritime industry.
Yes.
So that's how it is.
Related to the seafarers, the transportation, that's a really big industry,
right.
Like the travel and how do you manage people getting on and off, and even the well-being. So all these areas that I think that women are very much into.
Yes, we have, there's a company called Stag Marine, and they are doing a lot on the mental health of the seafarers. They are very closely associated with us and the partners with us, and a lot of women in that team who drive that aspect of the business to understand the psyche of the seafarers when they come offshore, what to give. So again, it's another industry within an industry, I feel.
Yes. Well, with that, I hope that we did inspire some or many, hopefully many.
That's true.
And that they will now look it up and find a place for themselves here as well.
As an organization, as I said, as YC Ventures Group, we are happy to meet, discuss, mentor, guide people who want to establish themselves in this industry, give them the right guidance, resources, mentorship, and the know-how and the clients itself. So please feel free and have just connect with us, and we can discuss. So that's what I would like to say.
I will place links in the description of the episode so that they can find.
Great.
And thank you very much for being my guest today and for sharing this conversation.
Thank you so much for inviting me. It was a pleasure talking to you.
Likewise.
Thank you.